to not option, you can do the same time.
You can do it.
I've got a few of these, if you want to stare at some music.
1 between 3.
Great. It's fine, it has worked. We're live, it's all good. It just says stuff like that. So, welcome everybody in the room, on Zoom and on YouTube. It's a huge pleasure for me to introduce the head of composition at the RNCM, Professor Adam Gorb, who's going to be not only talking about his new, really extensive sequence of preludes for piano, but we're also really lucky to hear 4 or 5 of the RNCM keyboard students who'll be playing them and exploring them in more detail with him today. And Adam will introduce the students as they come up to play. Adam needs very little introduction as a composer, particularly here at the RNCM. He's been the head of composition here for 22 years. I stand corrected. And in that time has produced, despite a huge workload, a really diverse array of different pieces, characterized, I think, most recently by 2 extensive operas. And I think that really feeds into the pieces that we're going to hear spoken about today. Having heard the full cycle for the first time last night, these are characterful pieces, these are discursive pieces, these are pieces that take you on a real sort of narrative journey, as well as being these little prelude vignettes. And I can't wait to hear more about them. Professor.
Larry, can you write a review, please? That sounds great. So, anyway, thank you. Thank you for braving the indoors on this beautiful, sunny, almost midsummer day, and for coming today. So, I'm obviously not going to be able to talk about all 24 piano pieces, but I want to give a little overview of my general reason why I like to write for the piano, and why the instrument is so important to me, and why I wanted to do this particular project. So, I mean, so today it's for the 3rd decade of the 21st century. It's a bit unique because there's no technology. It's just a piano, some fabulous piano students, and my smiling face. So that is a sort of as kind of advanced as it gets. So, I mean, the piano has just been a part of my life ever since I can remember. It's probably, I suppose when I'm thinking as in compositional terms, along with the E-flat clarinet and the bass drum, my favourite instrument. It's something I've been writing for ever since I was I started out. I mean, there was a piano in the house ever since I could remember. I was doodling on it from a ridiculously early age. And, but a couple of seminal things I think are important as far as where I was going to go as far as writing is concerned. I mean, very early sort of piano lessons. I mean tunes like sort of, I don't know, I'd see little books, and we're talking now about the early 1960s probably, and I'd be sat down and play a little tune called Pixie Polka. You get the idea. And so that, strangely enough, didn't quite turn me on. But I had a wonderful teacher. I had a wonderful teacher called Stella, who was my first proper piano teacher, and she introduced me to the music of Bela Bartok. And of course, back in the 1960s, Bartok was really considered a contemporary composer then. And the piece that really, really did it for me was a piece from Volume 4 of Mikrokosmos called Melody in the Mist, which starts like this, roughly. I didn't play it wrong. True melody in the mist. You get the mist and you get the melody. You get the clusters and you get the modal inflection of the actual melody. And to me, much later on when I was at university, I remember getting terribly annoyed with some of the lecturers at Cambridge University in the late 1970s who got sort of such a kind of great turn on in talking about the emancipation of the dissonance and Schoenberg. And I hated the idea of the dissonance being emancipated. I think that was the great problem with me with 12-tone atonality. It's destroyed any sense of dissonance in music, and I think dissonance is one of the glories of life, like the right seasoning in food. And so, and going back to this Bartok thing, I mean, I remember Stella said, of course, the best bits at the end, and I'm not going to tell you what happens at the end of this Melody in the Mist until next week. I think she hid it from me. And so after these classical scores, then at the end, with this nice melody, and at the end you get this, and you get, which, you know, I've ever since then, I've had an occasional thought that in another life I'd want to take Bartok to the best Hungarian restaurant in London, the Gay Bazaar, and have goulash and what's that lovely red wine that they call it? Bull's blood, that's right, and have a meal with him and say, I think he actually wrote to the American composer Henry Cowell asking whether he was allowed to use a dissonance like that because he heard it in Henry Cowell's music. But that was formative, just that sort of general sense of freedom at the keyboard, and I love that. Another moment, and I'm very obsessed with harmony, and diatonic dissonance was in when a bit later on in life, when I was probably an early teenager, I clumsily crashed through the Beethoven piano sonatas, playing them all atrociously and some not at all. But I won the second movement of the Opus 90 sonata in E minor, the E major word. I mean, a wonderful piece, very unlike anything else that Beethoven wrote, but there's one bar in it later on that absolutely sort of sent me to heaven, was the, this. I'm only going to play about a bar. That, really, I mean, so the figure in the middle, with its inversion, okay, he was deaf, but you know. And then, wow, eat your heart out, Petrushka. And that sense of sort of exploration and freedom and love of exploring the keyboard was really hit home to me. So Preludes. I mean, of course, there's a noble history of Preludes. I mean, why am I even bothering? I mean, first of all, Bach. Again, I've clumsily bludgeoned my way through the Bach 48 Preludes and Fugues, and I was never going to write 24 fugues. I'm not good enough. I mean, of the 24 Preludes, the final Prelude in C major which ends in C major, is a fugue. But I mean, I love counterpoint, but I simply couldn't have done that. So, of course, there's Debussy, there's Rachmaninoff, there's Chopin, there's Shostakovich, and so I suppose to write 24 Preludes in the 21st century, I suppose this would celebrate a certain kind of eclecticism, a certain sort of love that I've had for the piano repertoire. I mean, I don't know if a single note I've written in any of these Preludes, or indeed in anything else, is of the slightest bit of interest as far as originality goes, or it says anything new. I mean, that's for other people to say. But I mean, what does interest me, and has interested me, and did interest me, writing these Preludes, was the context of each Prelude, one after another, or one before another, and seeing whether I could sort of end one and start another in a totally different and radical way, if you like. So, for example, the Prelude number 9, which was these Preludes were written in 2019, and I finished them off in 2020. And my first month or two of the lockdown was actually quite refreshingly busy, sort of finishing them all off. And so, Prelude number 9, which was a tribute in 2019 to the centenary of the birth of a composer I really love a lot, Galina Ustvolskaya. I've sort of written here, is the most brutal, sublimely soulless, industrial, and I hope exhilarating 1.5 minutes of anybody's listening experience. I've tried that. And then to follow that with The Girl with the White Parasol, number 10, which is totally unashamedly sentimental and romantic, not so much composed as discovered, maybe from underneath a piano stool, where it's been loitering and yellowing since about 1904. And so if listeners can sense something that links these pieces with any kind of musical DNA, I'm happy. If not, I'm still happy, because at least they listened to them in the first place. So in these pieces, I mean, there are no extended piano techniques. I mean, I did a chat with Claire Hammond about this. I'll talk about her in a minute. I like it when, certainly in a solo situation, when people sit at the piano. In one piece, number 18, I think it is, Globalization, where I use a tuning wedge which gets sort of stuck sort of around one of the strings, or three of the strings, and it gives a dry drum-like sound, almost like a tabla, or maybe to impersonate some sort of Javanese or Balinese drum in that sort of context. So, tiny bit of advertising for a second. These pieces, the CD is on sale outside for a mere £10, and the music is available from Composer's Edition. They publish quite a lot of my stuff these days, and it's there. So Claire Hammond, with a big project. I mean, of course, when I was much younger, I would just sit and write piano pieces all the time, and probably with the hope that somebody might play them, and probably quite a relief that nobody did. But I thought, well, there are different kinds of pianists. I mean, there are pianists I enormously respect, like Rolf Hein or Ian Pace, who specialise particularly in new music, and they go where other pianists don't go. And there are some other pianists, I suppose, sort of, I guess, Marta Argerich type pianists who are superstars, or Yuja Wang, people like that who are way up there, but you wouldn't normally see them playing in a new music recital. Claire comes somewhere in between that, in that I think it was Alban Berg who said you should play new music like it's old music, and old music like it's new music. And I think that's a rather lovely thing. I mean, you should rediscover Beethoven, Schubert, etc. afresh, and then play the new stuff like it's there, it's always been there, it's always existed, and play it like that. So, and she's commissioned a lot of people, she's always including a lot of new stuff. She'll put a Brahms sonata with a new piece. I mean, she's very enterprising in that way, and that's what I like. I mean, so in the end, I mean, I finished so I wrote a piece for her about 8 years ago called Velocity, which actually was inspired. I don't know if anybody's seen the film Speed, where I think it's Sandra Bullock has to drive a school bus over 50 miles an hour through a city, or it will blow up. And I thought that was the middle section of the film. I mean, it's just so exciting. And it's for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. It just goes at that speed, only faster. So I thought there's an inspiration for a frenetic piano piece. So and it's very difficult. It's on the CD as well. And so she played that quite a few times back in about 2015, 2016. And I'd always thought I do want to write something else for her. And I suppose it cleared some time, and spoke to her about 4 years ago, and I thought she was going to say no, I'm far too busy. Who do you think you are? And so I'm quite delighted that she said, yeah, okay. So the project was to do a CD, to do a recording, and but of course she was going to play the pieces before the recording to get them in her fingers, so she could actually. In the end, of course, certain pandemic type things interfered, and the first few concerts couldn't happen. And so the first pieces were played, I think, September, October last year, and she did a few concerts there. She hadn't played all of them in public when she did the recording. So some of the pieces last night, played by the students, were premieres, which is great. So I played by 24 students, 12 students, right. So the recording was made in 2021. So I'm now going to sort of start talking about the actual pieces. I mean, I'm terrible at talking about my music because I tend to forget about things when I've written them. I mean, I write them and then they go. It's sort of it's in one hand and out the other. And but the context of the first piece. So maybe Ifan, if you want to come down. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll say a few things first, and then I'll ask you to play it. That's all right. Yeah. So if you want to go there. I think surprise is a vitally important thing, and of course there's a certain sort of concentration span. I mean, these pieces all together are about 65, 66 minutes, and I think if I'd written a 65-minute piece, I don't think anybody would have performed it, and I could see why. I mean, sometimes with some students, I mean, they want, in a very worthy way, they want to write long, big pieces for piano that a friend of theirs will play. And it's so often happened that something has gone wrong, and the 30-minute sonata didn't get performed, and in the end they cut it down and just a bit of it was done. So I do like the challenge. One of my favourite challenges of stopping and starting, of the idea of when a piece finishes, how does the next piece start? To what extent can you subvert the listener? To what extent should there be silence between one piece and another? I mean, last night, the piece that I think Roxana, you're playing drums, I suddenly hit upon this wonderful idea that you should almost interrupt the pianist playing, who was playing before. And just for those of you who weren't there last night, it was the first half was done with two pianos, and so there wasn't too much sort of people seeing people walking on and off. So one pianist would play one. That's on one piano, another pianist would play on another piano, and the first person would walk off, the third person would walk on, and so on. So as the 11th piece finished, I thought the 12th piece has got to come in completely, sort of madly, straight away. So the first piece, the first piece it's just called Prelude 1, and it's very terse, it's deliberately unseductive, but hopefully quite alarming, and hopefully quite almost nails on the blackboard, and grindy and gritty. And it's only a minute long, and it is just a descent and a rallentando. That's what it is. That's all it is. And the shock of number 2 is that after this, it starts with an F major chord. So this second piece, it starts surprising. It follows on from the almost static ending. By the time the first piece ends, I actually put a metronome mark of crotchet heels 8. I really enjoyed doing that. And of this very arid first prelude. And so this was very much a post-pandemic piece. It's called Coming Together. And it's about community. Community is very important for me, of course. People interacting with people. So the fun of this piece was that I said every pitch in this piece is a chord. Actually, I've got another copy for this. If you want to take one further back, it's good. Got some more here. Every pitch is a person, I meant to say. And so, after the first chord, and right up until just before the end, no chord is alike. It's like always different people meeting with this chorale that goes all the way through. And above it, and below it, and sort of during it, there are bells going all the way around. So it's a hopefully very triumphant portrayal of a village community. And that's some sort of small community, all sort of popping their heads above the parapets again and coming to light after the darkness. So thank you very much, Chopin. So yeah, with that one, the chords start at 3-note chords and eventually become 9-note chords by the end, as sort of more and more people are meeting up together. So I won't, there isn't time and perhaps not the right place for me to sort of mention every single prelude. So I'm going to go on to prelude number 4 now, which is called Madam, I'm Adam, and which is the same construction of a sentence as a man, a plan, a canal, Panama, and able was I ere I saw Elba, Napoleon. So that's a palindrome. And I like palindromes. Well, I like trying to write them. I don't know whether I've done it very successfully, but I like the idea. I mean, time can only move forwards. There's a lot of palindromes. I mean, there's in Milberg's Lulu, there's an example, and Webern is full of palindromes in the piano variations, I think. And I like the perceived idea that time can move backwards as well as forwards, although it obviously doesn't. And so this is, and as well as palindromes, the other sort of obsession I have is with monody on the piano, which is one note after another, only one note at a time. I think the piano is, 88 different notes. If you had very, very long forearms, you could probably play all 88 notes at the same time, and which could be wonderful, but maybe not to be done too much in every piece. And so one has to start thinking of the word limitation, and I think limitation is a vastly important thing. I think for any composer really. I mean, I respect them hugely for what they don't do as well as what they do. And the piano is an instrument that cries out for limitation, whether it be harmonic or rhythmic or numbers of notes or register. For example, quite a few years ago, about 20 years ago now, I wrote a piece called Straight Jacket, which is for tuba and piano, where the piano is a tuba. So, the piano can only play in the tuba register, which is about, and only one note at a time. And it was just, it liberated everything. The limitations liberated me so much by just doing that. Of course, I cheated a bit in that piece in that I used the pedal, and the piano probably plays faster than the tuba could ever play. But even so, it was still made for a much more equal partnership. So in this piece, it's about a minute long, this piece, or minute and 15 seconds long. So blink and you'll miss it. And so the monodic effect is blurred by the fact that it sounds like a lot of broken chords. So maybe Ethan, if you could come down, thank you. So if you could just maybe play the moment where the monody happens. Not monody, the palindrome happens, yeah, the monody, definitely, yeah. We were really worried about all this sort of seat moving in the rehearsal because some seats were squeaking, others were making sort of strange mouse-like noises. We wondered that was going to be part of the sort of the general entertainment, but it ran very smoothly.
Just from now?
Just play that, those 3 notes, and then this is the retrograde. But now, if you could play from there, 35 to 46. Yeah. So that's a little bit of it where the palindrome can just about still be perceived. I mean, I thought, when I started writing the piece, I thought this is going to be really easy, just have about half a piece, and then just do it backwards at the end. And it didn't work out like that. The first, up till bar 40, it was actually quite easy to write, because I sort of know what I wanted, I just fiddled away and it happened. And then I wrote the bit going backwards, and I realised it doesn't work so well backwards. So the further I went on in the piece, going backwards, the more I had to adjust things in the first bit, going forwards. And I knew where I wanted to get to, but it was actually quite difficult in the end, and more difficult than I thought. So, I recommend palindromes, but I don't recommend them for ease of writing. So, okay, I think that's all I want to say about the piece. Yeah, okay, so Ethan, thanks very much. Very fast music. Yeah, and just to add that I use palindromic procedures in a couple of other pieces in the Preludes, and number 11, which I'd call E-do lerp. Yeah, wait a minute, yeah. No, 1-1 E-do lerp, which is Prelude 11 backwards, is Prelude 1 backwards, as simple as that. Only it starts incredibly slowly and ends up really fast, and then segues into the drums one. But so the next one, a childhood memory, Prelude number 8. This is, I suppose I was thinking of a kind of mixture of vaguely folk-like innocence and swirling murkiness. There's a sort of call to attention, very fond of clusters, a cluster at the beginning, and the piece is quite sort of painterly, I suppose could be a word, in that it's just there, it exists. I don't think the actual duration of the piece is one of the important things about it, although things do change during the piece and things do develop and there is a certain direction. I mean, it's something that I'd love to be able to abolish direction in a piece, but I just keep failing all the time. Rather just having something and just being able to restate and move around it rather than go somewhere and go from A to B. I'm still working on that, and this piece doesn't manage it, but I'll give it a try. A couple of inspirations for this piece. I mean, there's that wonderful Debussy prelude at the beginning of book 2 of his Preludes, Brouillard, which has these lovely sort of consecutive triads with coloured over by black notes. And the other piece I thought of, funnily enough, was Puccini's La Bohème, which the famous opening of Act 2. But you actually, and what Puccini sometimes does so beautifully, he does this with the famous tune in Gianni Schicchi, O mio bambino caro. He anticipates it at a previous moment. So in the first act, you just hear sort of something. When the friends are all talking about, what could be out there in the Latin Quarter in Paris. I mean, there must be such wonderful food and drink and partying and dancing going on. They're just thinking about, we want to be out there. This actually, that looks forwards, of course. This looks backwards. In that, I suppose it's a sort of, I don't know whether we all have those sort of fleeting, tender seconds when we just think about a wonderful moment of our childhood and it's gone, probably in less than a second. You think, that was a wonderful moment, I want to hang on to it. But no, then you suddenly realise where you are. Sometimes first thing in the morning, when you wake up before you realise, what's happening. But you know, so here, I mean, I try and extend it for about 4 minutes in this piece, in this piece, and there's a crucial silence. I'm very fond of silence, about 2/3 of the way through, where everything just stops. It's like a blackout, and then it wakes up again. So, Liana, thank you. This is Prelude number 8, Childhood Memory. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was great. So we have one more piece from the first 12 of the Preludes. This is called just Drums, and as I mentioned before, it comes straight after the Edu-Lerp 1-1 Edu-Lerp, which is Prelude number 1 backwards, and which ends with sort of, I don't remember its name, some revolting noise like that. And then so I asked Roxana to come in straight after that to cut off that dreadful sound with something really funky. And as I mentioned before, this is where the real melody and the mist influence, and then also other pieces by Bartók, like his Out of Doors suite, the opening, and the finale of the fourth string quartet. That's brutally dissonant as well. And then certain other piano pieces. There's a great piece in one of the Spectrum books, which is a sort of collection of piano pieces, mainly educational. There's one piece by Jonathan Harvey called FF, which is very memorable. So it's a tribute to clusters, but I mean, pitch and harmony are less important. Higher and lower are more crucial. It's not so much playing the right notes as playing enough notes, I think, probably in this sort of situation. So, Roxana, let's take it away. Let's hear drums. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So these were all pieces that were played last night, so fantastically, and thank you for the great performance again. There's one more piece I want to talk about, because I want to actually talk about one piece from the second set, the numbers 13 to 24. Of course, sadly Claire Hammond couldn't be here today, so I thought it'd be nice to play an example of a later prelude, which is number 16, Survivor. I mean, I chose it because I can just about play it, and you're going to get the wonderful experience of my lecture theatre debut as a pianist in 22 years of working here. I haven't given out the music because I don't want you to see the wrong notes that I'm going to play. The piece is actually, this is the second piece I've dedicated to Claire. I mean, I dedicated my first piece for her Velocity, and this one is very, very simple. It's another monody. It's a slow monody, and Claire's her PhD thesis actually was on the pianist Paul Wittgenstein, who lost an arm and so commissioned a lot of people to write pieces just for the left hand, the most famous piece being the Revel Concerto. So I thought, so this piece is actually for the right hand, although I'm probably going to use both hands because I don't give a damn how many fingers I'm going to use anyway. But I use the sustain pedal plus a bit of other pedal as well. Writing a meaningful, long melodic line, I think must be the hardest thing to do for me. And I do love the idea of being able to write melody. I've tried my best here. As I say, it's another monody. It's a cello melody, played in a vast open landscape. There's a novel I read a while ago called The Cellist of Sarajevo by Stephen Galloway. I don't remember much about it now, I must reread it, but this idea that music conquers all is such an important thing. I mean, music, beauty, love, nothing else really matters. This is Survivor. Any questions? Don't have to be. I may not be able to answer them, but David.
Yeah, thanks very much, Adam. I'm just shouting so people can hear possibly at home. Last night, several of us kind of felt that the second half were perhaps darker than the first half, and I just wondered if you could reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the second half, while I was writing the second half pieces, I became more and more aware that there needs to be some sort of overall structure. When I wrote the first pieces, I was just thinking, how shall I contrast one with another? There's some quite humorous pieces, and I thought there needs to be some overall form for those who would like to listen to the whole thing, all 65 minutes of it. I think one just doesn't want to just go from one to the other in a slightly straight road. So I think the darkness comes from, like this piece and the previous two pieces and a couple of pieces afterwards, being quite slow and meditative. The piece before this is called samatha, which is a Buddhist term for peace. And it's very, very static, and nothing much happens at all. It's about 5 minutes long. And I think I wanted to just generally slow down everything that's, that people expect. And then the fast pieces towards the end, I then have 4, I think, scherzo-like pieces that get faster and faster and wilder. And they get quite sort of, quite crazy and hysterical. And that's probably thought of as quite dark as well. And then it probably takes the final fugue, which is the longest piece, which is about 7 minutes long, to really, as it were, put everything back on an even keel. But there are less character pieces in the second half than there are in the first half, I think, probably, yeah.
I wanted to follow up, I hope you don't mind. I was struck that some of the preludes remind me of etudes. But not all, certainly not. I was just wondering if your mind you saw a distinction between them. I'm thinking like 1 and 11. To a certain extent, even Survivor, in that it kind of really limits the technical idea to one thing, and then it works within that. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Well, there's limitations again. I mean, I limited myself there with one mode, well, E major, and a certain range of the instruments. This could be played on a cello, and one line, and a monody. So, which in effect, I don't really see much distinction between a prelude and an etude. I mean, a prelude just means before the game. And if I was to write 24 etudes, I'd probably think of perhaps certain, like the Debussy etudes and the Chopin etudes, certain pianistic challenges for each one. And I wasn't thinking about that. I mean, there are obviously pianistic challenges in these pieces, but that wasn't the specific foreground. So, yeah, if they sound like etudes, I mean, but then some of them hopefully don't sound like etudes at all. I mean, I think Prelude is a sort of, I suppose, a get out of jail free for writing anything you like.
Jane, do you want to ask your question out in public?
Oh, that's really nice. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's horrible feedback for me. What I've written is for pianists, and especially Adam. I'm so sorry not to have been able to hear Claire Hammond's performance last night. And I also wanted to thank, well, David is the first person who's asked a question, but you're beautifully audible. I actually was wondering, as David was asking his follow-up question, whether you had a pedagogical intention, either for pianists or for composers, or really for pianists and composers. And I think what you're saying is the answer is yes. Do you want to say something about that? And then I'll follow on.
Yeah, well, I think there's a pedagogical idea for pianists, and not necessarily for composers. I can only write for myself, really, so I don't know whether any other composer is going to learn anything from it. But I certainly wanted, and probably failed, to write certain pieces that were actually technically not that difficult. They all have their different. I mean, obviously, to play a piece really well, you need to be a really, really good pianist with that sort of sensitivity and sense of structure. So, but I mean, I'm not a good enough pianist myself that I was thinking of certain ways of stretching piano technique being the basis of a whole piece. I mean, I could probably have looked into it a bit more and done that. But certainly there are models, and from Bach all the way through to Usfalskaya, and then you see Bartok on the way. But I don't think there's any pedagogical intent for composers. I never really thought of that. I mean, if other people think that, that's fine.
And I think that's right. I mean, it may very well be that somebody comes along and says, aha, this is what you were trying to do, and this is what you were doing, and this is what I can learn. Or what I was typing when Larry gave me the opportunity to speak was, I'd written, that's the point of the really good etude. They sound like real music. They don't sound, if you think about the Chopin studies, for example, they're just marvelous pieces of music. So thank you very much indeed. I'll let other people ask questions.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, Simon.
As we know, orchestrated music is great. And I wonder to what extent you might consider orchestrating some or all of these. So to what extent would hermeneutic and semiotic aspects of some of the original limitations you propose actually be distorted beyond recognition that way, or would you like to know? Which remedy do you think might lend us this?
Well, I have a very flippant answer to start off with, is that for this prelude you just heard, I've just swapped the instrument to cello. I've done the orchestration. I mean, you wouldn't get certain resonance. I think it sits very nicely in the cello register. No, I mean, I don't know to what extent they would all work for orchestra. I didn't really think of it very much. I mean, yes, I'm sorry, actually, thinking about it now, with Jane's question, there probably were limited sort of compositional challenges, but really for myself rather than pedagogically for anybody else, like the modes that I use and the limitations that I put upon myself, which are unique to the piano. And so one would, I mean, certain orchestrations, I mean, for example, a piece I absolutely love is the Copeland piano variations. And because they sound so wonderfully limited. I mean, the way he carefully introduces pitches after certain periods of time, that doesn't come across in the orchestral version so much. I mean, the orchestral version is fine. I just like the piano version better. Whereas, of course, I suppose when so much of what Revel wrote, he wrote the piano duet first, but then, of course, what an orchestrator. But I mean, I suppose some of them would work for orchestra. I mean, if somebody asks me, I'll do it. But, if somebody says they'll play it, I'll do that. But I'm not going to just do it for my own fun. I'd rather do something else. So, maybe I might do one for string ensemble or wind band. I really don't know. I mean, somebody tell me to do something and I'll do it. He says, this is the thing. To just put me on the spot. Tell me not to go out. Tell me to stay at home, and I'll do something. Really. Right.
I think we should always directed note, Professor Helen Gorb, to orchestrate some something.
After I've had a nice summer holiday.
Right, I have a question just looking at the extracts, the score, and some of the titles you were mentioning.
Yeah.
So these are quite suggestive titles, quite personal titles, with the role of name, with little bits of quotations and dedications.
Exactly, yeah.
Of course, that makes me, I suppose, Debussy with the suggested titles that point in a certain direction. Where did those titles come from? What's the relationship between titles, dedications, and the way in which you conceived instructions?
Well, I mean, it depends on each piece. I mean, for example, what's the quotation in the Child's Memory? Something from Alice in Wonderland, isn't it? Can't remember. What is that?
Life, what is it but a dream?
Life, what is it but a dream? And that's the end of Alice in the Looking Glass. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think just to reference something that people might recognise from somewhere else. And I think the Shakespeare quotation in "I'll put a girl around the earth in 40 minutes." I just love that quotation. I just love the 40 minutes. And it's just for the monocle. I can't remember what it's called now. Madam, that's it. Yes, yeah. And I think mostly, I'll think of a quotation afterwards. I mean, there's one piece which was the third piece, which I call Klesfest, which is a celebration of basically Jewish humour. I put a little joke at the top, which is I think doctor to patient, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is you're not a hypochondriac. You know, I could have had a lot. I mean, I could have had that wonderful Groucho Marx quotation. I never forget a face, but in your case, I'll make an exception. And or even something from Seinfeld, like "No soup for you." You know, I don't know. I just like. I mean, sometimes they are quite personal. Sometimes I don't need to put a quote. I don't think there should be a rule for it. I think it's just maybe gently provocative at times. And in that, sorry, going back to Klesfest, I also put quite detailed instrumental indications, like, you know, E-flat clarinet, trombone, and accordion. And but that doesn't mean I want to orchestrate it. It's just I want the piano to. I mean, I want the piano to sound like a trombone doing a slide, which of course is totally impossible on the piano. But there's one I want. You know, I think it's just something like. But I want bow, bow, bow. I want them to think about that while they're playing it. And so it does actually spur me on, you know, the whole, each piece having its little world. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah, no.
Just following on from what I was saying about them being quite personal, it's quite unusual to have a really big set of pieces. And you talked about the references from the different preludes, and you also spoke earlier about the very final chord being connected to Stravinsky and Bohème and all these different things. But you've not talked about any of your own music in relation to this. And there's quite a lot of big collected pieces from composers who look back on their own output and their own repertoire. It's sort of kind of refreshing that you've not mentioned any of your own music. Is this also secretly littered autobiographically with sections of pieces and events, or is this fresh and something new?
Hey, let me quickly try and think of an answer. No, I don't think it is, Larry, actually. It's the first sort of extended piano piece I've written for quite a long time. And so I haven't, I'm not sure. I suppose, so I keep quoting this Klesfest piece. I mean, that refers to certain sort of klezmer-influenced pieces I've written before, like Yiddish dances and the Valley called Simcha. No, I mean, the final fugue, I remember trying to write a fugue for piano when I was about 20 years old and failing miserably and throwing it away and thinking, well, I better try again. It was totally not in the forefront of my mind. I mean, because I suppose I'm slightly neurotic, that I don't repeat myself, that I don't keep writing the same piece. So there's a wind quintet or a brass quintet piece. Oh, I'm doing it for piano again. I don't want to do that. I suppose some of the gestures in some of the pieces, I suppose they're quite operatic and theatrical, but then I'm not really thinking of my own works in that respect. So, and no, I mean, it's you got me thinking. I might try and find things now that I didn't think were there before. Yeah. Hi.
I have a question about the limitation. I think you mentioned quite often about limitation in this score, and I wonder, when I look at the score, these four pieces, I thought the structure was quite clear.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of just the limitation you give to yourself, or just come naturally when you write the structure that just came in each pieces.
Yeah, although, well, of course, the Madam I'm Adam is an obvious structure. The structure is the limitation. So when I've got to the centre, that's all I can do. A lot of the other pieces, I really didn't plan at all. I just started them and I had no idea where they were going. And hopefully I have more idea the further I'm into the piece. I mean, I write at the piano, I write improvising at the piano, and hopefully by the time I've got somewhere, if I feel that the piece is worth continuing, a structure will gradually, hopefully for me, emerge. I mean, a few times there were about 5 or 6 times where I started writing a piece and I thought this was going nowhere and I just gave it up after a few bars or halfway through, and so they won't happen. But I mean, again, but then as things got on, as David said, the pieces got darker, it became clearer as to the sort of pieces I wanted to write. I mean, the one thing I did at the beginning was to write the rough names of the pieces with a mood and a length and roughly what was going to happen, a kind of emotional direction, just literally half a paragraph with maybe a few pitches on each piece. And then sometimes I totally went against that. I mean, couple of the later pieces completely didn't know what they were supposed to do. And I mean, one of the pieces, the Ouverture Française, which is, I tried to model it on a Scarlatti piano, one of his keyboard sonatas, the binary form. And so, again, it's looking at what other people have done and trying to make my own thing of it. Yeah? Yeah, please.
Just like last night I listened to the whole piece, 24 pieces, I feel it's actually telling the story when they come to all the 1, 2, 3, 4 to the end.
Yeah.
I just wondered when you write it, I just always find it's just fascinating. It's like the whole thing is like the whole structure and then the big development into the pieces. And I just wonder, do you write it in order or just like, I think you mentioned all the contacts, like the same before and the same after that. So I just wonder when you come focus.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did write them in order. I think I might have started the final few first, but then I couldn't do it, and I sort of thought I need a lot behind it before I can finish it. But certainly, as things got more, as I was saying earlier, as things progressed, it became more obvious that it had to be like that. I mean, for example, number 13, which is called Sliding Doors, which is a comedy piece which keeps starting and stopping and with a rather silly tune. It ends just with, I think anyway. And so the beginning of the next piece, Adagietto, which is a tribute to a Mahlerian Adagio, starts, or it might be the other way around. So there are certain, most pieces there is some kind of link with what we've just heard before. And I think that helped me, and I hope it helps people listening to them as well.
Great. Any more questions for Adam in the room or online? I think not.
No.
You see it online for a second. So yeah, I just wanted to say 3 things before we finish. One is next term. We haven't got the full programme of events yet, but in the second week of next term, we will be launching John Miller's book. And he'll be speaking about his recent and published research. And in the first week of next term, we will have Professor Barbara Kelly and Professor Denis Henner talking about their work. And we will have a reception to bid farewell to Barbara in her final week of the RNCM. We usually would suggest going to the bar, but not today, because as you know, we have a reception this evening with hummus, especially then for Adam, and plenty of wine, especially then for all of us, to celebrate not only this wonderful collection of pieces, but the end of the series for research this year. But really all I want to say is thank you to Adam for his characteristic generosity in talking about his pieces so openly for us.